Can you believe with this episode, it's been over half a year since the Starpoint podcast came out. That's right, there's 52 weeks in a year, and this is episode 27. So, I mean, time just flies by. I can't believe it's been going this long, and I can't believe that I'm still talking about Go. Last weekend, I went to a board game shop, just kind of strolled in with my girlfriend, and I wasn't looking for a Go board, but she looked at the floor, and there's like a giant Go board sitting right there, staring right at us, and I was surprised. You know, I just don't expect to see Go boards and board game shops, though this one was very, very stocked with many different kinds of board games. But this particular Go board caught our eye because it was very thick. It was like a 6-incher kind of thing, but it was in a box, and you know that very nice Go boards don't typically come in packaged boxes with the little features labeled on them and everything. And when I picked up the box, it was very light, suspiciously light. And you look at the box and you examine it a little further, and first of all, it's beech wood. It's not the highest grade wood, and it's hollow. You can see that it advertised that it has an open top, so you could, I think, assume store your stones inside the board, which, I mean, it's functional, I guess, but not the fanciest Go board. But it's really cool to see a Go board at all in any shop. And I mean, it was the only one. That was the only one in stock that I could see. And I always wonder, whenever I go into these shops that have Go boards, like, does anybody here in the vicinity have absolutely any idea what this game is? Like, do any of the staff members know? I really doubt it. But anyway, welcome to Starpoint, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And the topic of discussion for today, cue epiphanies. I'm going to specifically share with you the various epiphanies or aha moments or eureka moments that I've gone throughout my Go career. There's a term in Zen Buddhism that this reminds me of called satori, which is sudden realization or enlightenment. And I think that Go, it's such a mysterious game, and there are these concepts that you just can't translate from teacher to student very well. And the student just has to go and play games and study, and suddenly they'll understand at some point. I felt this way about a lot of proverbs as I went along my Go journey. There were a lot of proverbs or just advice in general that I would take in, and I would just kind of nod my head and then not really understand. But when I understood those things, it really made sense to me. And so I want to share with you some of the ones that I remember going through. The first one, I'm trying to go all the way back to when I was starting out playing Go, learning the basic concepts. And I would say one of the earliest epiphanies that I had, or realizations about the game that helped me advance, was that the 4-4 is not territory. It's not a territorial opening. Some of you might find this obvious. Some of you may be confused as to what I mean by this. But when you play a stone in the 4-4, that is a very common opening move, one of the most popular opening moves. It's not really supposed to try to take that corner as territory. You shouldn't think of that corner as territory. It's an influential move. But I didn't understand this concept back then because I would get annoyed when somebody invaded the 3-3 of that 4-4 that I played. Annoyed meaning that was supposed to be mine and you're taking it away from me. And I think a lot of Q players a lot of beginners kind of have this mentality, and they get really annoyed when people scoop out their territory because they don't understand the balance between influence and territory. And this was before AI. So 3-3 wasn't a common opening move. It was kind of like a thing you would do later on in the game when you run out of all the big moves, because it was normally thought of as playing the 3-3 too early and giving your opponent that thickness was really, really bad. So I don't know when I started to understand that the 4-4 is not territory and that it's okay that you lose the 3-3. I think this one probably took a while. I think there were a lot of lessons that I had to learn in order for me to understand this simple concept. The next epiphany that I have here is some of these aren't as succinctly written, but like third and fourth line balance, I would say, is a huge one that I had to go through early on in my Go career. I think that it took a while for me to understand that most normal spots to play in the opening are third and fourth line moves. I always hated being covered up and losing access to the center. The center always looked so juicy to me. It looked so big and open, and it looked like there are a lot of points in the center. But as the Proverbs goes, there are no points in the center. And the corner is gold, the side is silver, and the middle is grass. I always liked that proverb because it doesn't say the middle is trash. It doesn't say the middle is like dirt. It just says it's grass, which is nice. It's just not gold or silver. So I like the quality of the proverb. And I'm still like this in a way. I'm not a very territorial player. And I'm trying to see if I can push myself to learn how to be a territorial player, because I feel like that is a part of my game that's missing. But anyway, this one was the third and fourth line balance thing. I was always trying to escape through the center and not understanding the value and the dynamic between the third and fourth lines. And this one, I don't even know how to explain it really. I think if you know, you know, but if you don't, you're going to have to think about this a little bit. The next one is also kind of more of an earlier realization that I had. Still kind of in the double-digit Q range. And it's something that's probably very obvious to a lot of people. But, you know, I think when we advance in our knowledge of Go, it's so easy to forget how difficult certain concepts were. And one of these concepts is when you're pushing along and you're kind of pushing one by one with your stones next to your opponent, the difference, the huge difference of pushing once, twice, 3 times, or 4 times before you either tanuki or hane or cut or whatever. Those are very, very distinct. And I think I was kind of just like, I always thought you had to push a certain number of times. And it's like, it's seemingly obvious when you think about it, because like, obviously when you push more times, you'll get more liberties. So, but then I was just kind of like confused as to when was the right time to stop pushing. And I'm still like, you know, this is something I'm still kind of like not always sure about. But the fact that like you can kind of analyze the situation after pushing once, like how many liberties do you have? How strong are you? How many cutting points do you have? What possible variations? Okay, what happens if you push one more time? Does that fix a lot of the issues? And just thinking analytically this way about how many times you're pushing and how many liberties you gain from that and how much strength you gain from that is something that took a while for me to understand. The understanding the changing stability of a shape as you push. A lot of double-digit Q players push and push and push forever, and they hane and push and hane and push and hane and push, and they never tanuki. And they don't. I mean, it's a beginner skill to learn for sure. You need to understand like when the arm wrestling match is over and you need to go away, or you need to fix, or you need to do something else. That's a hard one. Like there's multiple components to this, but I think the basic idea that I really had to get myself to understand was the value in pushing 1, 2, 3, or 4 stones. And I think that was a big clear moment for me when I realized that. Okay, and now we're getting kind of more into the single digit Q, kind of transitioning into that range, because I went to a Go club for the first time, and the person who was running the thing was offered me a teaching game, and I always thought I understood this concept to keep your group safe and take a base. This is something that I'm sure, like, if you're a Go teacher, you probably yell at your students, take a base and keep your group safe, like, all the time. Because I don't know why, it's just hard to understand. And I thought I understood this concept until I played a teaching game with this person. And after the game, they reviewed the game and said, like, hey, like, you know, I realized at this move it was kind of strange. And I was thinking, like, oh, you should have taken a base there. And what I did was I kind of flew up into the middle. So I'm still, you know, still going off the third and fourth line balance stuff. There's a lot of themes here that kind of run through a lot of my epiphanies. But he noticed I wasn't taking a base for that group. I'm like, okay, just like your logical move shouldn't be to fly up. It should be to back off or take a base. And then the way he played the teaching game was he would back off a little bit more. He wouldn't like attack me directly and just kind of wait for me to see when I would catch on to take a base. And the fact that I took so long, like it took 3 or 4 moves like later for me to take a base, I realized that I was playing like, it was like I was playing with my intuition, which is good. Like, I mean, it's not bad to play with your intuition, but my intuition was wrong. My intuition was telling me like, oh, this shape looks pretty, so play this shape. And then this shape was, and then the reason I took the base was because it was the next pretty move that I thought. So our intuition can tell us a lot about what maybe should be played, but sometimes you do need to know about certain concepts, like take a base. And what is a base? If you don't know what a base is, if you don't know what a basic simple base is and what I mean by take a base, maybe think about it. That is a very, very, very important concept to know about when you're playing Go. And it feeds into the concept about learning the difference between weak and strong stones. Oftentimes, the difference between weak and strong groups is the strong group has taken a base and the weak group has no base. The way to make a group weak oftentimes is to take the base of that group. And this is a really hard concept to understand. There are a lot of concepts loaded into one here in terms of learning weak and strong groups. I had a friend who was a Dawn level player, and he told me, like, after playing, you know, with him, he kind of assessed my strength and said, hey, I think what you should work on is you should pay attention to which groups are weak and which groups are strong. And that kind of just fell flat with me. I didn't know what exactly he meant by that. Like, I'm not really sure what I should be paying attention to. And I mean, I kept it in my head. I digested it. I continued looking at it and thinking about it, recalling what that means. And especially, like, you know, if I'm looking at a review on YouTube and noticing when they say stuff are weak or strong, trying to understand that concept again and again and just trying to practice things. Later on, I would play my dad, and my dad has always been stronger than me because I was just never like super into Go. But when I started really getting passionate about Go, I overtook my dad in skill. And when I played against him, and I noticed the way he was playing, and my advice to him was like, oh, you're too reckless and you leave your stones like weak everywhere. And that's what I told him. And he told me, like, how do I take care of all of them? There are too many. Like, how do I, you know, I keep all my groups strong? There's like too many. And I was just kind of like, wow, like this is what I struggled with. Like, I didn't know, like, how to make certain groups strong and, like, not have too many weak groups. And it's like this with a lot of stuff in Go. I didn't understand until I did. And that's what makes it so, like, Satori, like, or like, these are like epiphanies. Just to kind of do a little side note on how you're supposed to take care of all your groups. There are too many. One way to maybe look at it is, imagine an army general who has like 10,000 soldiers, and the way he commands his battalions, he assigns one soldier to go to each town in a country or across several countries. That's not really the way you should manage your army, is it? A enemy who is organized and actually groups up their soldiers can go into each town, look at the soldier and be like, you're our prisoner now. And the soldier has nothing they can do about it because they're all spread out and they can't help each other. If you've played the board game Risk, you know what I'm talking about. If someone thinly spreads themselves all throughout Africa, you can take your giant army and just stomp through every single country in one turn, and it's like, it makes sense, right? So, like, invest in your groups. Make the right groups. I think this is something I need to work on too, like making the right groups. Make the right groups in the right directions and invest in those ones. Don't put stones like confetti all over the board, I think. That's what I would have maybe told my dad. Okay, moving on to the next one. The next Epiphany is also another one that I learned from that teaching game. It was a very valuable teaching game, I'm realizing. It's the 2-move rule. You may have heard of this rule. It's common advice given to players, and it's a very simple concept for attack and defense. It's a principle for both attack and defense. When you're attacking, a lot of people kind of attack when they don't understand, or when, you know, it's what I did when I didn't understand. When I didn't understand how this worked, I would play a move that looked scary, sure, but maybe was just an empty threat. Or other times, an opponent played a move against me that looked scary, and I would respond, even though maybe that was an empty threat. The 2-move rule is when you attack your opponent, that attack should threaten a follow-up. So use a hypothetical to analyze your situation. If you play this move and your opponent tanukis, what is the second move that you get in this exchange that is so threatening to your opponent? If your second move doesn't really make a disaster for your opponent, and it's kind of maybe even less value than the tanuki move that your opponent made, then your attack wasn't really an attack. Same goes for defense. If your opponent attacks you, consider tanuki. Like, you say, like, okay, if I tanuki here and I take this other point that I really want to play, what's the worst case scenario here? What will tanukiing the situation do? Your opponent may get a nice move afterwards. They may get a hane that's annoying, but maybe it's not so bad. Maybe that tanuki is way more valuable. So always, in considering attack and defense, consider what the follow-up damage is and weigh that option with the next move you're making. I'm going through all these epiphanies and I'm like thinking, like, I need to remember these for myself now, even though these are things that I did realize already. Like, I feel like I'm not always putting these things into practice. So I should probably review these and just kind of remind myself to do these things more during my current games. But that's a very good rule of thumb to know about, the 2-move rule. And for one of my favorite realizations that I came across was, I'm going to call this epiphany, Let Sleeping Dragons Lie. I was a terrible dragon slayer. I loved killing dragons. And sometimes I would be rewarded. And so that would definitely fuel my love of chasing dragons. And chasing dragons, honestly, it's so fun. Like, it's so fun just watching this giant group squirm away. And you're just like wondering if you can catch it. But more often than not, they would slip free, and it would leave a trail of demolition, it kind of burned down my entire city. All these stones that I wasted, just unproductive stones, and the dragon just chops through one and breaks free, and I'm left with nothing. I'm left with all these weaknesses. I'm left with no development, and it's just awful. So, Let Sleeping Dragons Lie, this epiphany that I had to go through was like, you don't always have to, like, slay the dragon. Just leave the dragon alone. The dragon is still a dragon, and unless you have a very powerful move against the dragon, just let it stay there, because often enough, leaving a baseless dragon is punishment enough for your opponent. You're going to get involved with other affairs. Your opponent's like, all right, you're going to let my dragon free? Fine, it's free. And then you're going to get into all these other scuffles, and then eventually your opponent's going to have to take care of that dragon again, and the tension will rise again eventually. Just don't like try to force the issue. And oftentimes, and I when I tried this and I tried playing more defensively, more, calm, and, using attack for benefit. One time I played this game where like I forgot about a dragon. Like I completely forgot about it. I was so focused on just all these other aspects of the game, and the game approached that area and I was like, oh my goodness, this thing is dead. And I was just so surprised, like, because I wasn't trying to kill it at all, but it was just a result of my opponent not taking care of his groups. So that one was a good one to learn, and it just calmed my play down. And after the break, I'm going to talk about what might be my next epiphany. Go Magic is a modern platform for learning Go. So go to gomagic.org for high-quality lesson videos with knowledge checks and interactive quizzes. They cover a wide range of topics, including how to play in the opening, common mistakes made by Q players, how to use attachments, and even some on Go history. Lessons are categorized from complete beginner level, so even if you haven't touched the game before, to Dawn level, and they're taught by strong amateurs and professionals. Get 25% off your very first purchase on gomagic.org by using the code STARPOINT, that's STARPOINT without any spaces, at checkout. So 25% off your very first purchase on gomagic.org by using the code STARPOINT at checkout, and helps the podcast out a little bit too. So I was going to tell you about my next epiphany that I'm planning for myself. I know that's not how epiphanies work, but I've been looking at my games and I've been thinking about, like, what am I missing? And let me do a little bit of an aside before I get into what I think is missing from my game. It's a little bit of a theory as to, I'm sure many of you heard that Western Go players are strong in the opening. They tend to be stronger in the opening, and they tend to kind of not be as good at fighting. And I have a theory about that, about why that's the case. When you learn a language, a new language, not your native tongue, a lot of the teaching that you have to get for learning that language it has to do with grammatical structures, tenses of verbs, and like which pronouns mean what, and when to use this tense and that tense, and why this preposition, why not that preposition? Oh, this is an idiom. This is just an idiomatic expression. And you learn all these terms. And when you ask a native speaker about these things, oftentimes they have no idea what you're talking about because they just know the language. And for you're learning this new language. You need a framework and a structure to understand this language. And so I think with Go, since Westerners are typically going to be adult players or people who are older, who have like not grown up with the game, typically getting into the game, that's my situation. Whereas a lot of people in Asia, they grew up playing Go because they were either forced to go to a Go class, or it's an extracurricular activity they did in school, and so it just comes more naturally to them. But for Westerners, a lot of us, we needed some kind of structure in terms of how to understand this game. And something that is very good for is opening in Go. Opening is a very principled and structured part of the game. It really is just follow certain rules. It gets a little more nuanced as the opening kind of creeps up into a little more, situations. But generally speaking, there are very, very clear opening principles. And that's my theory right now as to like why Western Go players are like strong at the opening, is because it's like the way they study. It's like they like absorb the framework of it. And they're able to kind of dissect why certain moves are this and why are that. Whereas in Asia, I think a lot of players, they just look at it and they go like, that's not good, that's good, that's not good. And you're just like, why? And they're like, I don't know, it just isn't. And so opening principles, I'll briefly actually go over a few of the opening principles These are from Yulun Yang's The Fundamental Principles of Go, fantastic book I've suggested in the past. But as you can see by these opening principles, they're very clear. First one, take an empty corner. Whether you play 4-4, 3-4, or a more like, obscure one, 5-4, 5-3, 3-3, etc. Learn the properties of each of them and learn how they coordinate with each other. Typically for people who are working on their Go, like 90% of the time, you're going to see 4-4s and 3-4s. And then take side extensions that are good for development from both sides, meaning there's like an enclosure or something that there are like enclosures on both sides of the extension. Side extensions have kind of like disappeared. They're not as popular nowadays. People mostly just go for the approach. But then the second class of moves is to enclose or approach a corner. So once you've taken a corner, you enclose or approach a corner, and or start and continue a joseki. Joseki is a very tense and urgent situation usually, and so you should play it out before doing any of the other big opening moves. And then single side extension. So I'm actually calling these like double development side extensions and single dev side extensions. So double dev, which is a first class move, meaning like the side extension is in the middle of two very good enclosures that face the side. Single dev, meaning like one of the enclosures faces the side and the other one maybe not facing it, or there's no enclosure there. And another thing about approaching, you should approach from the wider side. That's just a generally good principle to follow. And then the zero dev side extensions, meaning like it's not a good side extension. It's because it's like not optimally placed. And two space extension. So these are kind of like getting into the lower class moves. And there's a lot more, to know about all these different classes of moves. But these are kind of the general principles. And you can see how like, okay, maybe a lot to take in if you haven't studied this before, but the principles are there and you just have to kind of understand why and follow them. It's like very good for someone who's trying to approach the game from a first principles approach. Okay, why am I talking about this? I was supposed to tell you about my epiphany, my next epiphany. My next epiphany, I think, possibly has to do with my middle game judgment. I feel like I am not terrible at the opening, and like I can kind of juggle the right balance between all the different opening principles. But once we get into the middle game, I think I've always thought like once we get into the middle game, okay, it's time to fight. And I just read and fight and read and fight, which it's, there's a lot of that, but I think that I am not using my judgment enough, my opening brain that kind of judges like, hey, there's a 3-4 here, there's a 4-4 there's an enclosure here, what's the biggest move here? The one that kind of analyzes in that way based on all the principles that I know. I need to carry that kind of thinking into the middle game, I think. So I feel like I want to develop a little bit of that. And maybe there's a little bit of also, it's kind of related, understanding my opening game plan. Like I follow all these principles, but I maybe don't understand the bigger picture behind everything and what I'm trying to do with all these opening moves. And so I feel like I need to have like a higher level thinking, because I was going through an attack and defense phase, and when I tighten up my ship and I stop losing because I lose giant groups and I start losing just because of the points, I'm thinking maybe like it has something to do with my general plan for the game. And so, hopefully my next epiphany is coming soon. Maybe I experience it. Sometimes you experience an epiphany and it takes a while for it to pay off. Sometimes you realize something, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to, rank up like 2 ranks or anything. You're still going to need to let that epiphany flow through you and your stones and actualize on the board before the epiphany actually is something as part of you. And I'm still working on a bunch of all the other ones that I mentioned in this episode. So hopefully I can take all these lessons, and hopefully this helped you. Maybe there were some of these that you had not considered. Maybe a thought of you can think of your own epiphanies that you've gone through, and remind yourself as to certain ones that maybe that you've left behind. That's what it certainly did it for me. When I looked at all these, I was kind of like, wait a second, I kind of stopped doing that. I need to do that again. So we're going to go on to the next segment. Before we actually go into the DDK Advice Corner, I want to share with you some poll results from a couple episodes back. I asked you all how often you play Go, and the results have come in, and looks like most of you, well, not most of you, like 32% of you play a few games a week, which is reasonable. That's probably where I would have voted. I would have liked to vote 1 game a day, which is like at certain points, in time, I am like at that frequency, but yeah, few games a week is about 32% of you. And then the next highest would be multiple games per day at 21%. And that's impressive. Multiple games per day. You guys are committed. I'm really curious about the strength between these frequencies, whether there's any pattern there. And then underneath that is 17%, 1 game a day. And then underneath that, about 1 game a week, 14%, less than once a week, 14%. Just wanted to share with you those poll results. And now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. And the tip of the day is Panuki is instant thickness. You've all heard the proverb, a Panuki is worth 30 points. Maybe I want to kind of frame that one a little bit differently and say a Panuki is instant thickness. Sometimes I see players who have learned that it's not always good to capture stones because like sometimes like stones are small and it's like that's not a worthwhile endeavor. Like it's a good development to know about, right? Because you go from a player who always capturing every stone to a player who's kind of judging like, is this worth capturing or not? So it's a good development. But I do always see a lot of these players ignore Panukis and they give away Panukis, and these Panukis are very, very powerful. So like whenever you have an opportunity to take a Panuki or give a Panuki, consider it very carefully. Panukis are very, very powerful. They're instant thickness. It's almost like it's going to be invincible from now on. So don't let your opponent get a good Panuki, and make sure you grab good Panukis. Now, how to tell the difference and how to tell when is going to take a while for you to kind of have that judgment. But I think first of all, just be very careful around Panukis. If you don't know what a Panuki is, it's when you just kind of capture a stone, like a single stone. And the traditional Panuki shape is like the diamond, like basically, when you first demonstrate to someone how to capture a stone, like that shape that you make. Although it comes in various forms, it doesn't have to look picture perfect like that to be considered a Panuki. So yeah, just consider the Panuki. I would say like a lot of players, I think a lot of DDK players, they don't take Panukis seriously enough. And now it's time to get into some Go news. And the first piece of news we got is, I just want to let everyone know is that the registration for the 40th US Go Congress in Portland is open. And the early bird price deadline is April 1st. So go to the AGA website, usgo.org, for more information on that. The US Go Congress will be from July 13th through the 21st. And it's going to be at, I believe, Portland State University. And then there was the first European Grand Prix circuit tournament called the Tigre Eli Cup. And Kim Do-yup Sevendan won all his games and won the 1,000 euro prize and trophy from the hands of Ellie, the daughter of In Sung-hwang Eitan, the one who runs the Yeongguseng Dojang. And he's one of the main sponsors and creators of the Ellie Cup. I assume Ellie being named after his daughter. It's pretty cool. Second place was Ali Jabarin 2 non-professional from Israel, and Lucas Papera was last year's winner and was this year's third place, the 7 Dan from Czechia. It's a really it looks like there's like a photo of the event. It looks really nice. It's always nice to see so many Go players like huddled around all these boards. It's a nice sight to see. It looks like a pretty nice space too. I'm always so jealous about the Go scene in Europe. It seems like they have a very nice and lively scene over there. The PandaNet European Team Championship was also held on January 30th, and the online stage of the tournament passed the middle of the season, which consists of 9 rounds. So the results of the match, this is like a European country-based championship. Ukraine took over Sweden in a 4-0 sweep. Germany won over Hungary in a 3-1. Poland and Netherlands tied at 2-2. Israel and Romania, Israel took a sweep from Romania with a 4-0 result. And Czechia versus France, France took the win in a 3-1 score. And so this was round 5, by the way. That was the round 5 result, the most recent one. And after the 5 rounds, France leads with 9 points, and Ukraine is second with 8 points, and Czechia, Israel, and Germany all follow with 7 points after that. It looks like after the online stage is over, the top 4 teams of this league will qualify to a face-to-face final, so a live game final at European Go Congress in Toulouse in 2024. And we're going back to the 48th Kisei, and this is the 4th round results which have come in, and Yamayuta has tied it up again with Ichiriki Ryo. So it's been going back and forth between the two for the Kisei title. So it's 2-2 now. And there's some pictures of food, as they always do. And the food looks actually pretty good. There's like, I'm not sure if that's udon, but there's like some meat, some Wagyu meat or something. It looks really good. Maybe I'm just hungry. Yes, and then round 5, I'll cover round 5 when those results come out. And I want to also go over the 27th Women's Kisei, which was a pretty interesting story here because Ueno Risa avenged her sister, Asami, after Nakamura Sumire took the Women's Kisei last year. So, just to recap, last year, 2 years ago, Ueno Asami, female Go player, had the Women's Kisei title, and then last year Nakamura Sumire took the title from her, and this year, for the 27th Women's Kisei, Ueno Risa, who is Ueno Asami's sister, took the Women's Kisei title from Nakamura Sumire. And that was on February 5th. And there's a lovely little picture of Asami Ueno presenting flowers to congratulate her sister. They seem to have a very loving relationship. It's really nice to see. They're 5 years apart. So Ueno Asami is born in 2001, and Ueno Risa was born in 2006. And reading 2000s birthdays will always make me feel old. Apparently they room together, the two sisters, and they argue about who goes, like the people who go, or argue about bedtime. One of them goes to bed too late, and one of them gets up too early. It looks like a very healthy relationship. I mean that unironically. And then finally, the last piece of news I want to cover for today. Shinjin-so, of course, you know about him. 9-dan professional, has maintained the top spot in rankings for 50 consecutive months. Wow, that's crazy. He goes through his ups and downs, but he's been maintaining his very high level of play overall. And now it's time for a listener mail. Okay, regarding the Pure Volume 10,000 Hour Rule episode, Ciderpunks writes, the 10,000 Hour Rule, popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, was a bit of a misinterpretation of earlier research by a psychologist called Anders Ericsson. His study found that among 20-year-old violinists at a German university, there was a correlation between hours spent practicing and how accomplished they were. On average, the best violinists had logged 10,000 hours at that age. But there is nothing magical about that number, and they still had a way to go before becoming international quality violinists. Gladwell's, there's a link to Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule myth. You can go check out the Reddit comments to find that one. And then he also says, also in that article, Erickson is also on record as emphasizing that not just any old practice counts towards the 10,000 hour average. It has to be deliberate, dedicated time spent focusing on improvement. You know, I've heard about this dedicated, deliberate practice thing with the 10,000 hour rule. So I think I've heard of this busted myth thing, but I'm not sure about the whole Anders Ericsson thing, because I thought this was initially done with the chess masters. And okay, look, I think there's a thing about the 10,000 hour rule where it's like, okay, spending 10,000 hours on something won't make you an expert, but if you are an expert, you have likely spent 10,000 hours on that thing. And so I think it's like a necessary but not sufficient situation. So I mean, it's like what I was kind of saying was that like if you haven't spent a lot of time playing Go, that could be a reason, but that's not to say that that's going to instantly make you better. But thanks for writing in, Cider Punks. I think there are others that have more to comment about this 10,000 hour rule thing. So let's see what they have to say. Base 6 says, I think it's definitely not the case that just playing enough games will make you strong, if by strong you mean down level. There's a post on OGS where people compile the list of players with the most games on the server. There's only a single player at down strength with over 10,000 games listed there, and they've been at roughly the same strength for all the games they've played on the site. Almost none of those players show any meaningful improvement over their last 5,000 games. Nearly all of them are at STK strength, or were at one point, but they all plateau and no amount of grinding out games changes that. On the flip side, my guess is that most people that are strong Dons, 5 Dan plus, have played thousands of games, but there's more needed to reach that kind of level than just repetition. This isn't supported by the OGS game records for top players who primarily play elsewhere. Something more is needed, though, for the vast majority of players. Thanks for writing in, Base 6, and yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything you said here. I want to also, reiterate again, like, you know, just because you play a lot of games doesn't mean you're going to be good, but if you want to be good, you probably got to play a lot of games. And I actually took a look at that link that you provided, and I did a little bit of analysis on my own of all those games that were listed there, and although what you were saying is very true for the ones that I did find were good results, a lot of those players, the games that had been counted towards were 9x9 and 13x13 games, or I forget what the other thing I looked at was, but a lot of the games were kind of just like, you know, not really, I wouldn't qualify those to be part of like a good 10,000 hour grind. And I think that kind of speaks to the whole controversy with the 10,000 hour rule thing, is that like you spend 10,000 hours playing 9x9, you're not going to be any good at 19x19. And well, I mean, you might be somewhat good, you might have some strength left over, but there are key things that you're going to be missing. And so yeah, I guess I should emphasize that, like, okay, just because you spent a lot of time playing Go doesn't mean you're going to get strong necessarily. Thanks for writing in. Thanks for you guys' contributions. And Rach also has something to say about this. I'm fairly certain the 10,000 hour rule, or just in general, you get better the more you play, the longer you play, does not apply to Go. The number of games played seems to be utterly irrelevant. There are people that played less than 500 19x19 games and have reached Showdown AGA. Then there are many people that have played 10,000 games or more, even 40,000 games or more, and are still DK. The time spent wait, who's played 40,000 games? That's a crazy amount of games. I don't even know I'm curious now, like how many games do pros play? Okay, the time spent might be more relevant, but it is not a guarantee, as it seems to be with Rocket League, if what's stated in the episode is indeed correct, that there are no weak players anymore after a certain amount of hours spent. This is not true for Go. There are people that have reached Showdown after only a year, and there are people that are still DDK after 30 or 40 years of playing Go. Some of the latter players are happy with their rank, and they don't want to improve necessarily, but there are other players in that category that want to improve but can't for some reason. I will say that it does sound true. I will say, like, a lot of that sounds like you're right on the mark there. Like, you can play a lot and still be weak. You can play very little and still be strong. My friend got to two of my friends got to Dawn level like after a year, I think. But I think that you have to, I think one of the things I wanted to emphasize was that if you've been playing for 30 or 40 years, okay, maybe you have been playing a lot of Go, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you've been playing for a long period of time, but you haven't been actually putting in a lot of hours. And so it may feel like you put in a lot of time. I think I remember seeing in Yeongguseng Dojang, the thing that's run by In Sung Hwang, one of the things, like, he's like a doctor, I think. When you sign up for that it's like an INSEE program, kind of. He kind of looks at your Go and finds all the weaknesses that you have and prescribes like what you should do, like whether it should be life and death, whether you should play games, what kind of games you should play. And he prescribes these things. And one of the things that I think I saw like a feedback, someone was saying that like, oh, he said that I don't have enough game experience. And I've been playing for like the longest time, so I don't know what he's talking about. And I think this is kind of like, he prescribed that person like, hey, you need to play more games. You need to just get more scrappy and get more games in. And I don't know, maybe it has something to do with the rate at which we play games too. Like, okay, you might be playing for a long time. You may play for long periods of time, but let's say you play for like a 6-hour session every month. I don't think that's going to be very good, right? There's a lot of nuance to this topic. Rach has more to say though. One big difference compared to, say, tennis, playing a musical instrument, drawing, or video games is that all these incorporate motor skills and physical abilities to some degree. I believe that these kinds of skills get better just over time up to a certain limit, just by practicing a lot and doing the thing a lot, but that is completely absent from Go. Mental skills like reading in Go, what seems to be the most important factor that separates weak from strong players, can be trained by pure repetition only to some degree. There seems to be a limit that might be different for every individual. For me personally, I have not improved, referring to rank, over the past 500 games or so. I play about 2 games per day on average and review every game. I have more experience, sure, but that does not translate to improvement necessarily. Thus, the 10,000 hour rule does not apply without any additional considerations in my opinion. The hope to just get better the longer I play is not present for me. Well, I hope you rekindle that hope, because I feel like that's a very important part. I guess you didn't really say that you're not going to get better. You just said that like just because you play more, you won't be better because of that. So that's fair. But okay, I'm going to have to disagree a little bit about the whole motor skills thing. I think the brain is very much a muscle, and in terms of playing musical instruments, there are a lot of people who play the guitar and they do not improve at all as well. I think it's drawing, video games, all that stuff. Like, I think that what you described about Go applies to all those things too. And in fact, reading, I think, is the most like motor skill like ability in Go. The thing that I think that separates Go from those other things is the way higher level of like judgment that you need to make. I think that like the higher level stuff about like the very like, you know, quasi kind of like cosmic, not to use a Go term here, but you know what I'm saying, like the nebulous, that's the word I was trying to find. That kind of stuff I think is very, very difficult to achieve with experience. But I'm gonna say that like if you use your brain while you play, you will get stronger, just like when you're playing let's say tennis. But without the kind of proper guidance, yeah, you're gonna reach a plateau as well. And I want to also comment on your thing about not improving over the past 500 games. And I like how you called out referring to rank, because sometimes it takes a while for a rank to reflect our skill. I think that's very common. Sometimes we have improved, but we just haven't been able to actualize it with the rank. And rank and skill, I think they're not one-to-one. Anyway, thanks for all the very insightful things that you said, Rach. And Sanguinarian Phoenix writes, the 10,000 hour rule only applies to most people at most things. There are occasional outliers who can master something extremely quickly. Source, I was a former tuba prodigy who never wished for it. You know what's funny? There's somewhere out there is like a Go prodigy who is passionate about playing the tuba and is really jealous of you and wants to trade places with you. Anyway, thanks for writing in, Sanguinarian Phoenix. J199713 writes, personally, I've seen one-person accounts with thousands of games that plateau around 12 to 10k. Can't speak to whether they're trying to improve or not, but it can be a puzzling and somewhat harrowing sight to see for us improvement-minded players. I'm sure there's a decently strong correlation between time played and rank, but it isn't rare to see these counts either. Some food for thought. Yes, I've noticed, and yes, I 100% agree. It's very harrowing to see. It's like, oh no. But I always think like, okay, this is a club account. These are club players. This is a guest account at some like login. Like, okay, DDK players play on this computer and then they just kind of go in and out. That's what I think. That's just been a theory that I've seen float around. Maybe now would be good time to ask, like, are you okay? Out of you guys out there, like if you consider yourself like a somewhat weaker player and you've played many games, like I want to know about like what happened and like how you feel about that and what your experience has been and what you think happened and like whether I want to know your thoughts about like whether playing a lot will improve your game. Thanks for writing in, Jay. I'm just gonna call you Jay. And then Sam Re Hero writes, I noticed that during the Go News segment, all the news seems to be outdated by the time it gets to us. There's not much you can do about that, but I would suggest perhaps adding on to the segment by telling us what matches to look forward to in the future and how to watch them, if you have access to that type of information. Well, Sam, I assume your name is Sam. I'm sorry about the outdated news. I guess the audience for that is basically someone who's just not really going to be on the pulse for those things and would like to just have some awareness for that. That's kind of what I want to try to provide. And you say there's not much I can do about that. I mean, I could try to record the episode right before release, but I don't think I'm going to do that. And regarding your suggestion, I'm sorry. I'm actually pretty bad journalist and I don't really have good sources and I don't really know how to find this information. Maybe you can go visit the Pro Go Paduk Weichi podcast. So that's another podcast. That's like the only other Go podcast that I know of. They haven't been releasing episodes lately, but they still might have a active Discord community, and a lot of them may have like more knowledge about where to find new games if you're interested in that. Thanks for writing in. And then lastly, we got Freelancer B28033. Interesting perspective on the 10,000 hour rule in Go. It's inspiring to hear about strategies for maximizing improvement while putting in the reps. Thanks for sharing. Well, thank you for writing in. And I hope that at least the episode made you guys think about the relationship between the hours put in and the amount of improvement we get out of the game. I think there's definitely a relationship. It's not like they're not independent things, but yeah, maybe there's a lot of critical thinking that we need to do, that I need to do about putting in the volume. I honestly have not been able to keep up the volume thing, but I did talk to someone who said they used to play 20 games a day, and that's a lot. That's a lot of games. And I believe I assume they got reasonably strong off of that. But anyway, we're going to go into the question of the week. What Go Epiphany have you had that allowed you to break past a plateau in your skills? I'm very, very curious about this. If you have any like moments, especially if you know how to get past my current level, which is like 1 Don Fox, 3Q OGS-ish. I'm slowly falling. But I would like to know. So please share your secrets, or if it's from, whatever plateau breaking that you've had in the past, I would love to know. So if you want to share your thoughts on this question, you can comment on Reddit or on YouTube, or you can send an email to me at starpointpaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can like and subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. If you're on YouTube and you want to be notified of the latest episode, go ahead and hit the bell button. You know where that is. And you can also leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And thank you all so much for listening, and keep playing Go.